In this video, I'll be breaking down the differences between a good mid laner versus a bad mid laner in the laning phase. I'll be going through with you 4 important elements to master to stand out as a dominant mid laner. Perfecting these concepts will definitely help you climb ranks. For each aspect highlighted, I'll show you an example from a good and a bad mid laner from the replays of my students. If you enjoy the content that I'm putting out, please consider clicking on the like, comment and subscribe button. Also, if you want to interact with me or like-minded Dota 2 players, feel free to join my Discord community server. The link is in the description box down below. With that said, let's get into today's video. Laning mechanics are the most important part of the lane that decides your ability to snowball your lead off the lane. Good mid players will have very dominant laning fundamentals such as understanding of matchups, creep aggro, last hitting ability, spellcasting efficiency and many more. Let's dive into examples of a good and a bad mid laner to show you the different levels of laning fundamental understanding. So for our first example, we have a melee against a ranged hero. This melee hero, Dawnbreaker, is my student who's currently Ancient 5, and you're gonna see that he has very good laning mechanical skills because of his familiarity with the hero as well. Whenever you guys are playing as a melee hero against a ranged hero, the most important thing you have to understand is, in order to not get harassed a ton by staying near the wave, you gotta ensure that you pull aggro to your range, right? Doing so will draw the guy, beat him in, and using this opening is how you push them out. For those of you that are familiar with the video I've made previously, one of my first ever videos, this is a concept that I talk about heavily there. So he's gonna walk up, click this guy and pull back, right? Walk up, click this guy, pull back. So that already demonstrates good creep aggro fundamentals. He knows how to pull aggro to range and why he's doing it. So after he does that, the next step, a very interesting one, is gonna walk in and click this melee creep. What he's trying to do here is trying to set this creep up for his spell execution. So his spell's kill range will look something like a half health or a 2/5 health. At the same time, he's gonna draw this guy in with the creep aggro that he did earlier. So already all this demonstrate, number 1, good creep aggroing fundamental. Number 2, understanding of setting creep into punishment of spell, right? Number 3, understanding how to protect the creep that he has drawn aggro in to bait the enemy hero in. And then he's just gonna punish the guy heavily. So you can see he's gonna secure that creep, hit this guy a ton, make him lose a lot of health. At the same time, he's gonna be able to deny the range creep here. Alright, so earlier, of course, there were 2 range creeps alive. The aggro earlier was down for the range creep behind. It couldn't be done here because this range creep was hidden within the melee creeps. Yeah, so already a ton of harass has been done at level 1. And he's eventually gonna kill this guy soon. Right, all of that demonstrates a mid lane player that has good laning mechanical skills. Now let's move to a bad example where we'll see a mid laner with poor laning mechanical skills. So for this second example, once again we are bringing up a melee versus a range because it's the most easy to identify whether a player is good or not in the laning phase. Okay, so Meepo, an Archon student of mine, playing against Templar. Clearly this guy is outmatched in lane until he gets his ult to start trading with the Templar. So until then, he needs to understand melee against range, like we mentioned in the first example. You gotta ensure you always pull aggro away if you're playing into an unfavorable matchup, right? Whether or not you choose to walk in and punish the guy after depends heavily on how the matchup is spaced. There's gonna be some matchups that's almost impossible to trade and punish off. So in those cases, like Meepo, weak laner at level 1, 2, generally you want to just pull aggro away. However, you're gonna see that this player does not pull aggro as fast, but instead he stands really close to the wave and just keeps getting hit by the hero. Right, still here, he's trying to force a creep instead of pulling the wave away. So that's good aggro there, yep, that's good. Now, still see no creep aggro to range, despite being this low, it's not pulling the wave away. Oh, by the way, this is an item bug back then, so ignore this, there are actually items in his slot, yeah. So he doesn't pull back, and he just stands really near to the wave. What's worse is he's trying to deny a melee creep in front of Templar that's just gonna keep side bleeding him to lose health. Okay, so far we have identified that this player mistakes in lane. Firstly, poor laning mechanical skills because he doesn't understand how to aggro or why to aggro rather. He doesn't respect the ranged hero that just keeps punishing him, especially a hero that's like Templar that just keeps splashing him through a creep. He does not understand the fact that he cannot secure denies or last hits in front of this guy because his health is really low, right? All of this makes him a mid laner with poor laning mechanical skills. Alright, I hope that makes sense. Let's move to the next part. Before we continue with this video, I would like to announce that I'm currently offering large discounted rates of up to 45% for my long-term coaching sessions. So if you're interested in working with me to grow as a player, feel free to check the description box or reach out to me to know more. You can find hundreds of 5-star testimonials from students on my Fiverr page to see how they have improved over time. With that said, let's get back to the video. Rune control is extremely important for mid laners to keep their sustain up in lane, especially if you are playing a hero that depends on bottle. Good mid laners will always ensure that the runes are controlled by them to decide their ongoing sustainability to outlast the opponent mid laner, or to ensure that the opponent mid laner does not get a good gank off a good rune. However, there are also gonna be instances where going for rune is not always going to be the right play at certain times. Let me show you an example of a good timing to go for rune and a bad timing to leave lane for rune. So a very big part of playing the mid lane is ensuring that you always have control over both the runes, or at the very least one rune, especially if you're playing a bottle hero. So over here, this is a 2k MMR student and he's playing Death Prophet. You're gonna notice the timer is already 5:45. Oops. Timer is already 5:45, right? It's almost 6 minutes soon. It's extremely important that you try and secure the first power rune whenever possible. So the ideal play would be to start pushing the wave out, so that this opponent does not have time to de-push the wave back and go for the rune. Right? So normally when it's gonna be like 5:40, 5:45, you're gonna start thinking about pushing out the lane, going for the power rune, and then checking if that power rune leads to a gank or that power rune leads to a mid kill. Okay, so as mentioned, this guy's gonna swarm the wave, try and kill the wave fast. Speed this up a bit. Okay, he's setting creeps, getting his spell off. Alright, now it's 6 minutes. And immediately he's gonna go over to check for a rune. Now in cases, let's say this rune is not like here but up here instead, and this guy is like gonna walk up there, you can always opt to TP over to this side so that you can still get the rune in time if the enemy is gonna like start stealing it. Okay, of course ideally you wanna ward beforehand. So this knowledge itself tells us that this player knows how to control runes. He knows the importance of power runes. And because of this power rune, he's gonna be able to transition that into a kill on this guy, right? And that's a good tower dive. Okay, so with the H rune, he gets a free kill here. This is the beauty of Death Prophet, by the way, guys. Make sure you're diving towers like this when you're 6. Okay, and that becomes a kill. Now let's look at a bad example of rune control. Now we have a bad example of rune control. So normally by default, a lot of players, when the 2 minutes or 4 minutes water rune spawns, immediately they are thinking about going for the rune, right? Like I mentioned in the first example, yes, when the timer for rune, normally the power rune is about to spawn, like 45 seconds you want to start pushing out the wave to take the rune. However, there are gonna be instances where you actually don't want to do this. So this is one of those specific instances where if you are able to pressure the guy and kill him under his tower, you should never be leaving for the rune, because what's happening is you're essentially giving up the control of what you have established in lane and going for a rune and allowing this guy time to recover and buy regen to go back to high health again. Okay, so ideally what you want to be doing here as the Shadowfin, oh by the way, this is like a 2k MMR player. So this bottle he has, firstly the mistake he made, he already got tower aggroed, but that's fine. He just needs to de-aggro now by attacking his own creeps. Then he will proceed to have to run into the puck and raise him to death while using bottle and tango to sustain. However, instead of doing that, he chooses to go for the water rune, and now because of that, the puck is also able to take the top water side rune and recover with the bottle over here. Alright, so what he should have really been doing was to ignore that rune and just to run the puck down in lane with the wave he had. So guys, always remember, just because the Rune spawns, yes, by default majority of time you want to push and leave to Rune. However, if you're strong enough to kill the guy under his tower and pressure, given you have resources, do not leave for the Rune yet. Alright? Okay, let's move on to the next part. The most dominant mid laners are extremely knowledgeable of how tower aggro works. They will often pair Glyph of Fortification with big advantages in lane to dive the enemy mid laner and kill them under their tower. Mid laners that do not have good understanding or are fearful of diving towers will often find themselves going even or losing lane a lot of times. Let's see a good mid laner perform a successful tower dive and a bad mid laner not tower diving due to fear of dying under tower. Here is one of the most common scenarios we tend to see when we are playing mid. So here we have a Dawnbreaker, 4.5k MMR player, diving this Invoker, level 5 against level 4, high health versus low health. Now what most players would tend to do, they are less familiar with the concept of tower diving, that do not fully understand how tower aggro works, is they would actually go back and proceed to block the wave. They will not contest the denies, they will not punish the hero because they are too afraid of towers, and they are too afraid of heroes ganking them. So if you guys are in a scenario like this and you have high level and health advantage, this will always happen when you go like after 4 minutes. The 45 will be up and you have to start looking for these tower dives. Alright? If you have the opportunity to like dive, push up, 45 to keep the creep alive, let that tower target that creep and not target you by not drawing tower aggro, you're gonna be able to run the lane down. So let's play out this scenario and see what this Dawnbreaker is going to do. So he lets that creep die, but he's gonna use this as the 45 creep, follow this guy with his spell cooldown, and notice he does not click the hero. The most common mistake people do is they click the hero while under the 500 aggro range and the tower shifts to them. Right, of course you're gonna die if you do this. So if you wanna dive, you walk. Do not click the hero inside tower aggro range, within the 500 circle. If you're not familiar, you can watch my tower diving video on my channel. Alright, so you go, you throw spells and tower will not change to you. Now this shows a good mid laner that knows how to dive towers, that knows how to push advantage, that knows how to draw attention to himself, and eventually get the kill on mid laner to start running the lane down afterwards. Now let's look at the bad example of a mid laner that is afraid of tower diving. Okay, here is a good example of a player that is afraid of tower diving. So here we have Lina, level 5. This is a 3k student of mine playing in Legend, playing up against a Rubik that's below half health and level 4. Now using the same scenario that we just talked about, it's 4 minutes, he has 45, clearly ahead, dominant as Lina in lane. However, what he chooses to do here is he chooses to go and take the Rune. Now if you remember in the Dawnbreaker scenario, this guy is clearly stronger than Rubik, level 5. All he needs is walk up, throw a Dragon Slave, fortify this creep, run into the Rubik here. Right, so he walks in, Dragon Slave the guy, click the guy from outside aggro range, so outside 500, to toggle that 3-second cooldown. This will allow him time to walk in, stun this guy, click this guy one time for that 3-second counter to end. So all of this will actually deal a ton of damage to Rubik, where Rubik will drop like this to Dragon Slave, drop like this to like a right click, right? Drop like this to a stun, and then he can eventually just walk past tower out of the 500 aggro range and click Rubik from outside aggro range past his tower. So ideally that should be the play here. If a good mid laner saw this, he would be doing this. Okay, but instead, see what Rubik does. Rubik gets free farm under his tower, without regen, with just 2 now talisman, without boots as well. So Lina has practically just missed out on the opportunity to dive. Dragon Slave, click the guy without drawing tower aggro because it's outside 500 aggro range. Stun the guy here, click him one time, and the 3-second counter for aggro cooldown will end. Walk past the tower after the stun, click the Rubik from outside the 500 aggro range, past the tower, and Rubik will die that way. So I hope you guys are able to see that picture. Alright, and this is an example of a mid laner that does not understand his full capacity of how to dive towers when he's strong. Okay, let's move to the next part. The most common mistake mid laners do is not understanding when to gank and rotate to other lanes. The decision between staying in lane to depush the wave and farm jungle camps versus moving to another lane with intent to help side lanes is often debated and misunderstood. Let's check out two different scenarios where a good mid laner performs a gank that is justifiable versus a bad mid laner making a bad rotation that is not foolproof. Okay, so normally when we decide to make a rotation, it has to guarantee that the probability of play will be very high. That means if we move there, chances are high that we get a kill. Chances are high that we achieve something positive rather than just helping alleviate pressure or move there and give up our own lane. There has to be something that's achieved. So normally this will happen when you get a rune, right, like a haste rune, an inv rune, a dd rune, that will lead into a kill. Or when the enemies are diving your teammates and you proceed to counter gank by TPing in to help win the fight for your team, right? So here we have Lina with haste rune. She just picked it up a minute ago and she's checking. Alright, she sees kills at top side. Abaddon is low health, she's level 9, so she proceeds to move up. So definitely she's gonna get the kills here, she's gonna get Abaddon kill, possibly X kill. And this shows us a really good example of someone that understands why they're rotating for and what the probability play is. Right, so she gets that kill, potentially tries to turn the favor into 2 kills as well, but it doesn't work out that way, so she's done and she's going back to mid again. Okay, so a rotation and a gank must look like a very positive play. It cannot be random movements just because you feel like you're mid and you have to move. Now let's move into a bad example where a mid laner moves for the sake of moving rather than moving with purpose. So here we have a Crusader mid laner playing as SF, and he's walking to the bounty rune to refill his bottle. So normally after the bounty you have two options, whether you return back to mid to depush the wave and farm a camp, or farm their camp, right? Or you take the bounty and you proceed to a gank. Now, what we mentioned earlier is a gank has to guarantee that chances of probability is high, that a play works out in your favor. So as a Shadow Fiend, the chances of landing a kill is extremely low because number 1, you do not have catch, number 2, you do not have reliable stun, and you have to rely on your teammates to really set up a kill for you. So a kill for Shadow Fiend is really only ever off a haste rune, or like when people are diving towers. Otherwise this guy just needs to hit creeps and farm, push lane and farm. Okay, so when he ganked this, there are too many things that can go wrong. Firstly, Pudge hiding in the trees he does not know. So if they have a ward here spotting him, and this Pudge saw him, he gets hooked, he's going to die. So that makes the gank a waste of time. At the same time they are full health. Level 7 Viper is a big trap with ult, so if he walks in, get ulted by Viper, really close to the tower and a lot of potential teleports can come in, this entire gang is going to go wrong. So just from this knowledge itself, we know this is not a play he has to make, or he should be making. In fact, the play he should have been making was take bounty, go back to mid. Because as a Shadow Fiend into full health heroes, and these two, Shaker and Weaver with Shaker having no blink, makes this a 0% chance play. If Pudge sees him, he's going to die. If Viper even Shadow Strikes him, he's going to die. And that's probably what's gonna happen here. So now he's just chilling, farming camps, waiting for an opportunity to join the cleanup or the gank, and then he gets hooked, and as mentioned, now he just dies to the gank. Alright, and he has given up his lead, which was really far ahead earlier. So try to avoid ganking for no purpose, moving for no purpose, just because you feel like you're mid lane, especially if you're a hero that does not have catch. Okay, I hope that makes sense. This is all for the video for today. I hope the video has been helpful to you to show you how to differentiate between a good and a bad mid laner and what mistakes you have to avoid. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.